He lived in a small, quiet neighborhood where the streets were lined with old trees and houses that had seen better days. Every morning, he would wake up to the sound of birds singing, but it was not the birds that made his heart race. It was the faint melodies drifting from a house at the end of the street. Behind the tall gates, he could hear the soft, flowing notes of a piano, each one weaving through the air like it was alive. He would stop in his tracks, close his eyes, and let the music sink deep into him. It felt as if the piano was speaking directly to him, telling stories he could not yet put into words. He had never touched a real piano. At home, there was only an old radio and a small tin harmonica his father had given him when he was younger. He tried blowing into it and pressing the little buttons, but it could never sing the way the piano did. Still, he did not give up. Every chance he got, he would hum along with the tunes he heard. Sometimes, he would sit at the corner of the room and tap his fingers on the table, pretending the surface was a piano. Each tap was careful, thoughtful, like he was practicing invisible keys, imagining the black and white pattern beneath his fingers. At school, the boy was quiet. He did not join in when other children played games or shouted in the playground. Instead, he carried a small notebook, scribbling down sounds he remembered from the streets, the market, or the music he had heard drifting from the tall house. To others, it seemed strange, almost as if he lived in a world only he could see. But for him, these notes were treasures. They were pieces of a puzzle he was slowly putting together, notes that he would one day play for the world to hear. His parents worked long hours and money was always tight. They did not understand his obsession with music. His father would shake his head whenever he saw him tapping invisible keys, muttering about practical things like schoolwork and chores. His mother would smile, but only because she knew scolding him would not stop him. She often found him late at night, sitting on the floor with the harmonica, eyes closed, lost in a song only he could hear. She would watch quietly, afraid to interrupt the magic he seemed to be creating. One afternoon, as he walked home from school, he passed the music store on the corner. Through the glass window, he could see a piano shining under the warm lights. He stopped and pressed his hands against the cool glass, staring at the polished keys. There was a sign that said, "Do not touch," but he did not need to read it. He could feel the music calling to him. He imagined the first note he would play, how it would feel to lift his fingers and hear the sound he had dreamed of so many times. For a moment, he imagined himself on a stage, with people watching and listening, and the music filling the entire room. His heart beat faster. Sometimes, he would follow the music to the end of the street, standing quietly by the gate of the big house. From there, he could watch the pianist, a woman with long fingers that danced effortlessly across the keys. She did not notice him, but he noticed everything. The way her hands moved, how her face lit up with each note, how the music seemed to flow from her as naturally as breathing. He wanted to learn that feeling, that freedom, but the piano remained behind the tall gates, untouchable, like a secret waiting for him to prove he was ready. He made friends with the music in his own way. He listened to old records that people gave away, trying to understand the patterns, the pauses, the highs and lows. He learned to recognize a song just by the first few notes and could remember them perfectly. Even when he was sad or angry, music was his companion. It understood him in a way no one else could. Some nights, he would lie in bed and hum a melody he had created, weaving the sounds together in ways that felt like magic. He did not care if it was not perfect. In his mind, the songs were alive, breathing with him, shaping his feelings into something beautiful. At school, there was a small piano in the music room, but it was always locked. Sometimes, he would peek through the window, watching other students press the keys, producing sounds that were either harsh or sweet, depending on their skill. He wanted to run in and play, but the thought of getting in trouble kept him outside. Instead, he memorized the tunes, replaying them on his imaginary piano at home, perfecting them until they sounded just right in his mind. He started to teach himself without knowing he was teaching. Using scraps of paper, he would write down the songs he remembered, marking where the notes went, drawing little symbols for the high and low sounds. His hands learned to move in patterns even before he touched a real piano. When he practiced on his harmonica, he could almost hear the piano in his mind, each note echoing as if the keys were right there in front of him. He was building a world of music, a place where he could be free, even if only for a little while. One evening, he found an old piano in a neighbor's basement. It was dusty and the keys were chipped, but it still had a voice. He asked the neighbor if he could try it, and to his surprise, they said yes. The first time his fingers touched the keys, he froze. The sound was louder than he expected, and it felt alive beneath his hands. But then, something clicked. He remembered the songs he had been humming for months, the tunes he had imagined on invisible keys, and suddenly the music started to flow. It was not perfect, but it was beautiful in a raw, honest way. He played until his fingers ached and his mind was spinning with joy. That night, he returned home exhausted but thrilled. He could not stop thinking about the piano, the way it responded to him, the way the music seemed to know him. He began to dream bigger, imagining himself playing in front of people who would listen and understand. He knew he had a long way to go, but the spark had been lit. Music was no longer just a dream. It was a part of him, something he could touch, feel, and one day, share with the world. Even as the days passed, he never lost that hunger. Every note he heard, every melody that drifted through the streets, became a part of his memory. He practiced on anything he could find, tapping tables, chairs, and even the floor, letting the rhythm guide him. People in the neighborhood began to notice the boy who always seemed lost in music. Some smiled, some shook their heads, but he did not care. For him, the music was everything. And so he waited. He waited for the day he could touch a real piano again, for the day he could play the songs that lived inside him. He knew it would come, because music was not just a sound. It was a part of his soul, and nothing could keep him from it. With every passing day, he grew more patient, more determined, and more certain that one day, his fingers would create something that could make the world stop and listen. He was a boy who loved music, and that love was strong enough to carry him through anything. The piano was waiting for him, and he would not be denied. The boy walked past the same street every day, but today was different. The sun had just started to set, casting long shadows across the pavement, and the house at the end of the street seemed even taller than before. Behind its high gate, he could hear the piano again, soft notes drifting through the air like whispers. He pressed his hand against the cold metal of the gate and listened closely. The music felt alive, almost as if it was calling his name, daring him to come closer. He had watched the house from afar for months. He knew the routine. The woman with long fingers would sit at the piano each afternoon, playing melodies that were both gentle and powerful. Sometimes, she would smile to herself, lost in her own world, and the boy would imagine what it would feel like to be able to touch those keys, to create the same beauty he heard every day. But every time he asked if he could come closer, the answer was always no. The gate was locked, the house was private, and the piano was untouchable. One day he gathered the courage to knock on the gate. His small hand rapped lightly, almost nervously. When the woman appeared, he could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He opened his mouth ready to ask, but no words came. Finally, he whispered, Can I try the piano?" The woman looked at him carefully. Her eyes softened for a moment, but then she shook her head. "I'm sorry," she said. "This piano is very delicate. You are too young to play it. You could hurt it, or worse, hurt yourself." The boy felt a lump in his throat. He had imagined this moment so many times, thought about it in the quiet corners of his room, and now that it had come, it was slipping away. He tried to argue, tried to explain how long he had been practicing, how much he loved music, but the woman's eyes were firm. "I cannot let you touch it," she said, and before he could respond, she closed the gate. For days, he could not stop thinking about the piano. Every note he had ever heard seemed to echo in his head. He practiced harder on his imaginary keys, tapping on tables, floors, and even the walls of his room. He remembered every movement of the woman's fingers, the way she curved her hands, the way her wrists floated above the keys. He tried to mimic it over and over until his hands ached. Still, it was not the same. The piano remained behind that locked gate, untouchable and distant, like a secret that was not yet meant for him. One afternoon, while walking home from school, he noticed a small flyer pinned to a post near the corner store. It was an advertisement for a local music recital, held in a nearby hall. His heart leapt. Maybe, just maybe, there would be a piano there and maybe someone would let him play even for a moment. He saved the flyer and ran home, his mind racing with excitement and fear. But when he showed it to his parents, they frowned. "It's not safe," his father said. "You don't know anyone there. You could get lost or hurt." His mother sighed. "Maybe another time," she said softly. She did not understand that this was not about safety or timing. This was about the music, the piano, the dream that had taken root in his heart. He could not give up. That night, he lay awake in bed, imagining the recital hall, the piano, the moment he would finally sit down and press the keys. He imagined the sound spilling out, filling the room, and the faces of people turning toward him in surprise and awe. He imagined the feeling of control, of power, of magic flowing from his fingertips. He wanted it more than anything else in the world. The next day, he decided to try again. He would not ask permission this time. He would wait until the house was quiet and slip through the gate when no one was watching. But as he approached the house, he saw movement inside. The woman was at the piano, her long fingers flying across the keys, her face serene and focused. He froze, hidden behind the bushes, afraid of being seen. The music was more beautiful than ever, filling the street with warmth and light. He felt a mix of awe and frustration. It was so close and yet so far. Days turned into weeks. He watched from a distance, memorizing every song, every note, every subtle shift in tempo. He drew the keys in his notebook, sketching black and white rectangles, labeling them with the sounds they produced. He imagined his fingers moving across the real keys, practicing silently, learning the movements, the rhythms, the flow. Every day, he grew more certain that he would play one day, even if no one else believed it. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. A small group of children from the neighborhood were playing near the gate, laughing and chasing each other. The boy had been standing to the side, observing the piano as usual, when one of them accidentally hit the gate with a ball. The gate swung open slightly. The woman rushed out, scolding the children, and in that moment, the boy stepped closer. His heart was racing. He did not move past the gate, but he felt a thrill, knowing that the barrier had shifted, even just a little. He returned home that night with a mixture of hope and fear. He knew he had to be careful, but he also knew that if he kept trying, kept watching, kept imagining, one day the piano would be his to touch. He practiced harder, not just on his imaginary keys, but on his harmonica, on the tables, on the floor. He practiced in the quiet hours before dawn and late at night, when the world was asleep and the music could live freely in his mind. One evening, the woman noticed him watching from the gate. She paused, her hands hovering above the keys. For a moment, she studied him carefully, as if trying to see into his heart. "You really love music, don't you?" she asked softly. He nodded, unable to speak. She hesitated, then said, "I cannot let you touch this piano yet. It is too delicate. But if you truly love music, there are ways to learn. You can practice on smaller instruments, study the notes, listen carefully, and wait." He felt a strange mix of disappointment and determination. She had not said yes, but she had acknowledged him, recognized the passion in his eyes. That small recognition felt like a seed planted deep in his chest, growing quietly, waiting for the right moment to bloom. He nodded vigorously, promising himself that he would not give up. Days passed, and he continued to practice in secret. Every time he saw the piano behind the gate, it reminded him of the challenge, the obstacle that he had to overcome. He imagined the day when the music would flow freely from his fingers, when the gate would no longer stand between him and the keys. He practiced patience, understanding that some dreams took time, that talent alone was not enough without persistence and dedication. One afternoon, he discovered a small park near the street, where he could sit quietly and listen. The piano music floated across the air, and he would close his eyes, imagining the keys beneath his fingers. He tapped rhythms on the bench, mimicking the melodies he heard. Sometimes other children would come by, curious about what he was doing. They would ask him to play songs, but he would only smile, tapping silently, explaining that one day he would show them. As the months went by, his love for music grew deeper, stronger, more urgent. He could hear the piano in everything. The wind rustling through leaves, the drops of rain on the roof, the chatter of people walking by. He began to see patterns everywhere, recognizing rhythms and melodies in the world around him. The forbidden piano was no longer just an instrument. It had become a teacher, guiding him to listen, to imagine, and to create even without touching a single key. He started to notice small signs of encouragement. The woman sometimes left her music books near the gate, visible but out of reach. Notes from neighbors would occasionally fall into his hands, telling stories of famous musicians who had started small, who had waited patiently, who had never given up. Each story reinforced his belief that he could do it too. The piano was still forbidden, but the journey to it had begun, and he was learning more every day than he ever could have imagined. Even though he could not touch the piano, he felt closer than ever to it. He practiced, observed, imagined, and waited. The music had become a part of him, flowing through his veins, shaping his thoughts and feelings. Every note he memorized, every rhythm he tapped, every melody he hummed brought him one step closer to the day he would finally sit at the real piano, ready to let his fingers create something no one had ever heard before. And so the boy continued. He continued to watch, to imagine, to practice, to wait. The piano was still forbidden, but it had become a symbol of everything he loved, everything he dreamed of, and everything he was willing to fight for. Each day, he grew stronger, more patient, and more certain that when the time came, he would be ready. The piano would no longer be a distant dream. It would be his, and he would play as if the world itself had been waiting for his music. The boy's days became filled with quiet determination. Every morning before school, he would wake early, taking small moments to hum melodies he remembered from the piano behind the tall gate. He would tap the table at home, creating invisible keys beneath his fingers. Each tap, each note was deliberate, careful, as if he were learning the piano in a world only he could see. His parents noticed how quiet he had become, how much time he spent lost in thought, but they did not fully understand. They assumed he was studying or daydreaming, but in truth he was practicing. After school, he would hurry to the corner of the street where he could see the piano house. He watched the woman play, memorizing every movement of her fingers, the way her wrists curved, how she pressed down gently, yet with confidence. He tried to mimic it at home, practicing the same motions with his hands in the air, imagining the sound flowing from the keys. Each day, he felt a little more confident, a little more connected to the music that seemed to live just beyond his reach. One day, he stumbled upon an old keyboard in a small second-hand shop. It was dusty and slightly out of tune, but it was a treasure. His heart raced as he carefully lifted it from the floor, feeling its weight, imagining the music that could come from it. He begged his father to buy it, explaining how much it meant to him. His father hesitated at first, but finally he agreed, and the boy carried it home like a precious gem. That keyboard became his world. He spent hours teaching himself to play, following the patterns he had memorized, trying to match the music he had heard so many times. He learned quickly. He could play the tunes he had memorized perfectly on the keyboard, each note flowing smoothly into the next. Sometimes he would get frustrated when a melody did not sound right, when a note was off or a rhythm felt awkward. But he never gave up. He played again and again, learning patience along with skill. Each mistake was a lesson, each success a spark that kept him going. His fingers grew nimble, learning to move independently, to press lightly or firmly, to create the sound he imagined in his mind. Music was no longer just something he heard. It had become a language, a way to express his feelings when words failed. When he was happy, he would play fast, lively tunes that made him want to dance. When he was sad, he would play slow, soft melodies, letting the sorrow pour out of him through each note. The keyboard became a friend, a confidant, a companion that understood him without needing explanations. In the quiet hours of the night, he would close his eyes and play, imagining the real piano, imagining the room filled with the same magic he had heard from the tall house. His neighbors began to notice a change. Some stopped to listen when they heard the music drifting from his window. They could hear the difference, the care and skill, the emotion that flowed through each note. Some were surprised that such a young boy could play so beautifully. Others smiled and shook their heads, thinking it was just a phase. But the boy did not care. He was not playing for them. He was playing for himself, for the music that lived inside him, for the dream that had grown so strong it could not be ignored. At school, he started paying closer attention in music class. He asked questions quietly, taking notes on rhythms, on the way scales worked, on how chords fit together. He practiced on paper, drawing out notes and symbols, imagining the keys beneath his fingers. Other children did not notice, or if they did, they teased him for being so focused. But the boy ignored them. He had a goal, and nothing could distract him from it. One day, a new music teacher came to the school. She noticed the boy tapping rhythms on his desk during lessons, the way he closed his eyes and hummed softly to himself. She asked him to play a simple tune on the classroom keyboard, and he did so with surprising accuracy. The teacher's eyes widened in surprise. "You have a gift," she said. "But talent is nothing without practice. Keep learning, keep trying, and you will go far." Her words gave him courage. He realized that what he had been doing in secret was preparing him for this moment. The small keyboard, the imaginary piano, the sketches of keys on paper, all of it had been training him. He practiced harder than ever, following the advice she had given, studying scales and arpeggios, learning to read simple sheet music, and playing with both hands. He began to notice improvements he had never seen before. His timing became perfect, his fingers moved faster, and the music that came from him was more expressive, more alive. Despite all his practice, the piano behind the tall gate remained in his mind. It was still forbidden, still untouchable, but he no longer felt frustration as he had before. Instead, he felt a quiet excitement, knowing that every day he practiced, every note he learned, every rhythm he perfected, he was getting closer to the real thing. The piano had become a goal, a symbol of everything he worked for, and that made every practice session meaningful. Sometimes he would play for hours without stopping, letting the music guide him. He discovered new melodies, combining the songs he had memorized into something entirely his own. His imagination became a workshop where he experimented, where he could create without limits. He learned to listen carefully, to hear the differences between sharp and flat, soft and loud, fast and slow. He began to understand that music was more than notes. It was emotion, it was expression, it was life itself. He also began to notice how music could affect others. His younger siblings would sometimes sneak into the room and watch him play, mesmerized by the sounds he created. His parents, though busy, would occasionally stop and listen, surprised at how much he had improved. Even the neighbors, passing by quietly, would pause, listening to the melodies that spilled from his window. The boy realized that music was a gift, not just for himself, but for anyone who could hear it. One day, while practicing, he made a discovery that thrilled him. He could play by memory almost anything he had ever heard. He could listen to a song once and reproduce it perfectly on his keyboard. This realization gave him a sense of power, a feeling that the forbidden piano might not be as far away as it once seemed. If he could remember and recreate music in his mind and on a small keyboard, then when he finally touched the real piano, he would be ready. He would not need to learn the basics. He could create beauty from the very first note. As the weeks turned into months, he found new ways to practice. He would close his eyes and imagine himself in a concert hall, sitting at the grand piano with people watching and listening. He would play imaginary performances, complete with crescendos, pauses, and dramatic movements of his hands. He even began recording his own humming, listening back to understand what worked and what needed improvement. Each day, he felt himself growing, not just as a musician, but as someone who could feel and express emotion through music. He faced challenges, of course. Sometimes his fingers would cramp from too much practice. Sometimes a melody would sound wrong, no matter how carefully he tried. Sometimes frustration would creep in, making him doubt if he could ever reach the real piano. But each time, he remembered why he started, remembered the music behind the gate, remembered the dream that had grown inside him. And each time, he picked up his keyboard again, determined to keep going. By the time the seasons changed, the boy was no longer the same as before. He was stronger, more confident, more skilled. His fingers moved like they had been made for music, quick and precise, yet gentle and expressive. His mind could memorize and create simultaneously, imagining melodies as he played them. And even though the piano behind the tall gate remained forbidden, he no longer felt helpless. He had grown, and he knew that one day, when the time was right, he would be ready to touch it. In the quiet moments of the night, he would close his eyes and play his favorite melodies, letting the music flow freely. He imagined the piano waiting for him, the keys shining under the light, and for a brief moment, he felt as if he was already sitting there, creating the magic he had always dreamed of. That feeling, that hope, carried him through each day. The secret practice, the growth, the patience, it all mattered, and he knew that one day, it would lead him to the moment he had been waiting for his whole life. The day had been long, and the boy had spent hours practicing on his keyboard, but tonight was different. There was a tension in the air he could feel in his chest, a fluttering like the wings of a bird trapped inside him. Something was about to change. He had been waiting for this moment for years, dreaming of it during every quiet hour, imagining it in the corner of every day. Now it was finally here. He walked down the familiar street slowly, as if savoring each step, each sound. The sun was dipping behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The house at the end of the street loomed larger than ever, its tall gate standing firm. But there was a new feeling tonight, a sense of possibility. He could hear the faint notes of the piano drifting through the air. Someone was playing, and as he listened, he felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. This was the piano he had watched for so long, the piano he had memorized, imagined, and longed to touch. That as he reached the gate, it opened. He froze, unsure if he had imagined it. But no, it was real. The woman stood there, looking at him with a careful expression. But there was a glimmer of something new in her eyes. "I think it is time," she said softly, and the boy's heart leapt. His hands trembled as he stepped forward, crossing the threshold into a world he had dreamed of for so long. The piano was even more magnificent up close. Its black and white keys gleamed under the warm light, and the polished wood reflected his nervous face. He approached it slowly, his fingers hovering above the keys, hesitant to touch what had been forbidden for so long. The woman stood to the side, watching quietly. "Go ahead," she said. "Play what you feel. Let it come from you." For a moment he could not move. The weight of the years of waiting, the hours of secret practice, the melodies memorized in his mind, all of it pressed on him at once. Then, slowly, he lowered his fingers onto the keys. The first note rang out clear and true, vibrating through the room and into his chest. It was more beautiful than he had imagined. It was real, alive, and it belonged to him. He closed his eyes and let the music flow. His fingers moved naturally, as if they had known the keys all along. He played melodies he had memorized, tunes he had invented, and rhythms he had tapped out on tables and floors for years. Each note was a piece of his soul, each chord a story of his patience and dedication. The sound filled the room, spilling out into the evening air, and he felt an incredible sense of freedom, of joy, of triumph. The woman watched in awe. She had seen many people play piano, but nothing like this. There was a raw, honest beauty in the boy's music, a magic that could not be taught, a natural gift that had been waiting for the right moment to shine. She could see the years of longing, the secret practices, the countless hours spent imagining this very instant. And now it was happening. The piano was no longer forbidden. It was alive in his hands. He continued to play, lost in the music. He did not notice the soft light falling on the keys, the shadows stretching across the floor, or the way his own heart raced with each passing note. He was fully present, fully alive, completely connected to the music. Each melody he created felt like it had always existed, waiting for him to bring it into the world. His fingers moved with confidence, yet with care, pressing each key with purpose, letting the sound resonate with emotion. Time seemed to stand still. The boy did not think about the past or the future. He only thought about the music. Every note was a declaration of who he was, a story of struggle, patience, and love for something that had been forbidden for too long. He could feel the power of the piano beneath his fingers, and he realized that all the hours spent practicing on smaller keyboards, on tables, and in his imagination had prepared him for this exact moment. The woman finally spoke, her voice soft and reverent. "You have waited so long, and you have practiced so much. This is your gift. Let it shine." Her words gave him a new energy, and he played with even more passion. He experimented, creating new melodies that flowed naturally, combining the tunes he had memorized with the rhythms he had imagined. The music became more than just sound. It became a living, breathing expression of his journey. He could feel the room responding to him. The walls seemed to hum, the air seemed charged, and even the smallest sounds of the house faded away, leaving only the piano and his music. He played loudly, then softly, then faster, then slower, letting the emotions guide him. He discovered the joy of improvisation, the thrill of creating something entirely new, of shaping the music as it came, letting it tell its own story. The boy did not notice how long he had been playing. Hours could have passed or minutes. It did not matter. He was in a world of his own making, where the piano and he were one. His hands ached, his chest was full of emotion, but he could not stop. The music had become part of him, and he could not separate himself from it. Finally, he slowed down, playing a soft, gentle tune that filled the room with a sense of calm and peace. He lifted his fingers from the keys and sat back, breathing heavily, his heart still racing. The room was quiet except for the faint echo of the last notes lingering in the air. He opened his eyes and looked at the woman, who was smiling, tears glistening in her eyes. "You have done it," she said. "You have brought the piano to life. I have never seen anything like it." The boy felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of accomplishment that words could not describe. All the waiting, all the secret practice, all the longing. It had led to this moment, and it was more beautiful than he had ever imagined. He realized something important then. It was not just about touching the piano. It was about believing in himself, about working patiently, about letting passion guide him even when the path was blocked. The piano had been a challenge, a test of his dedication, and he had passed. He had created something that had been impossible for so long, and it was all his own. The woman stepped back, letting him take full control. He played one last melody, soft and pure, feeling the music flow through him like a river. He could see the wonder in her eyes, and it gave him a sense of pride and joy unlike anything he had ever felt. He knew that this was only the beginning, that the piano would continue to be a part of his life, that he could explore, create, and share in ways he had only dreamed of before. As he left the house that night, the piano behind him seemed to hum softly, as if thanking him for unlocking its voice. He walked home slowly, his heart full, the music still echoing in his mind. For the first time in his life, he felt that anything was possible. The world had changed, or maybe he had changed. Either way, he knew that the magic of music would always be with him, guiding him, inspiring him, and reminding him that patience, dedication, and love for what you do can create moments of pure wonder. The boy went to bed that night, exhausted but happy. He dreamed of melodies, of notes flowing from his fingers, of a future filled with music, creativity, and joy. The piano had been forbidden for so long, but now it was a part of him, a symbol of what could be achieved when you never give up on your dreams. And he knew that the journey was just beginning, that the music he had discovered was only the first chapter of a story that would continue to unfold in ways even he could not imagine. From that night on, the boy was no longer just a boy who loved music. He was a boy who had discovered it, who had conquered fear, who had touched the piano and let it sing through him. And he carried that magic with him, ready to face whatever came next, one note at a time, knowing that the music would always guide him. The boy woke up the next morning with a quiet excitement still lingering in his chest. The piano he had touched, played, and brought to life the day before felt like a part of him now. The memory of each note, each movement of his fingers, stayed vivid in his mind, and he knew that what had happened was only the beginning. For years he had dreamed of this moment, and now it had finally arrived. He walked through the streets with a lighter step, noticing things he had never paid attention to before. The sound of leaves rustling, the rhythm of footsteps on the pavement, the tiny melodies that seemed to exist in everyday life. Each sound reminded him of the piano, of the music that had been living inside him for so long, waiting to come out. He hummed softly as he walked, letting the music fill the morning air, feeling it flow from his mind through his body and into the world around him. Word of his performance had begun to spread quietly through the neighborhood. People who had heard the music from his window or seen him practicing at the small keyboard started to talk. Some were amazed that such a young boy could play with such skill and emotion. Others were curious to see him for themselves. The boy did not notice the attention at first. He was too focused on the music and the joy of being able to play. But slowly, he realized that what he had created had an effect on people. It could move them, inspire them, and bring them closer to something beautiful. His parents began to see the change in him more clearly now. The quiet boy who had always been lost in his imagination had grown into someone confident, disciplined, and passionate. They watched as he moved through his days with purpose, his fingers dancing through the air as he imagined melodies. They saw the pride in his eyes, the way he carried himself with a newfound sense of achievement. It was as if the music had given him more than skill. It had given him a way to understand himself and the world around him. The woman who owned the piano noticed too. She invited him back to play whenever he wished, and each time, she gave him gentle guidance, helping him refine his technique, encouraging him to experiment, and praising his creativity. She showed him new pieces, explained techniques, and introduced him to the deeper aspects of music. The emotions behind chords, the stories hidden in melodies, and the importance of listening as much as playing. The boy soaked it all in, grateful for the chance to learn from someone who could see the potential in him and nurture it. One day, she told him about an upcoming community recital. It would be held in a small hall, and anyone with musical talent could perform. The boy felt a rush of nerves and excitement. This was a chance to share his music with others, to let people hear the sounds he had imagined for so long. He practiced tirelessly in the days leading up to it, playing old melodies, new creations, and improvisations he had developed. Each session was a mix of concentration and joy, as he prepared to step into a larger world than the one he had known. The day of the recital arrived. The boy walked into the hall, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never performed in front of so many people before, and the thought made him nervous. But he remembered the piano behind the gate, the years of secret practice, the moments he had spent imagining this day. He sat at the grand piano, lifted his fingers above the keys, and took a deep breath. The first note rang out, and the tension in the room shifted. The audience was silent, listening closely, drawn in by the music that flowed so naturally from his hands. As he played, he noticed faces in the crowd. Neighbors, parents, friends, and strangers, all captivated by the melodies. They could feel the passion, the patience, and the joy in every note. The music told a story of perseverance, of dreams that had waited patiently, and of a young boy who had never given up. It was not just the sound that mattered. It was the emotion behind it, the love and dedication that shaped each tune. People were moved, some with tears in their eyes, some smiling in awe. The boy realized that music could reach hearts in a way words could not, that it had the power to connect people, to inspire, and to heal. After the performance, many came forward to congratulate him. Teachers, musicians, and neighbors expressed their admiration and encouragement. Some offered him lessons, others invited him to perform at different events, and a few shared stories of their own experiences with music. The boy listened humbly, grateful for the recognition but still focused on the journey ahead. He understood that this was only the beginning, that there was still so much to learn, explore, and create. His parents were especially proud. They had watched him grow from a quiet, observant child into someone who could take a dream and make it real. They realized that the music had given him more than skill. It had given him confidence, patience, and a sense of purpose. They supported him in every way they could, making space for practice, encouraging him to explore, and celebrating every success, no matter how small. The boy continued to practice every day. He experimented with new melodies, blending rhythms from different sources, creating songs that reflected his own experiences and emotions. He listened to recordings of famous pianists, learned from their techniques, and found inspiration in their performances. Each new piece, each new challenge, strengthened his skills and deepened his understanding of music. He began to see that mastery was not a destination but a journey, one that required patience, curiosity, and a willingness to grow. As he shared his music more widely, he began to notice the impact it had on others. Children who had never paid attention to music started to hum his tunes. Adults who had been busy or distracted stopped to listen, drawn into the melodies. People spoke of how the music made them feel calm, joyful, or reflective. The boy realized that his dream had grown beyond himself. It had become something that could touch the lives of others, something that could inspire hope and beauty in the world. Over time, he began teaching himself new techniques, exploring different styles and genres. He learned to read music fluently, to understand complex compositions, and to create arrangements that combined multiple melodies into harmonious pieces. Each day brought new challenges and discoveries, and he welcomed them with enthusiasm. The piano that had once been forbidden had opened a door to endless possibilities, and he embraced them all. He also learned important lessons about humility and perseverance. Sometimes a piece would not sound right, or his fingers would stumble, or a melody would escape him. But he did not give up. He practiced again, understanding that mistakes were part of learning, that patience was as important as talent, and that true mastery came from effort, focus, and love for the craft. Each challenge made him stronger, more confident, and more prepared for the future. Years passed, and the boy's love for music continued to grow. He performed at local events, participated in competitions, and shared his music with friends and neighbors. The recognition he received did not make him arrogant. Instead, it deepened his commitment to practice, to learn, and to inspire others. He began to see music as a gift, not just for himself, but for anyone who would listen. He understood that talent could be nurtured, that dreams could be realized with dedication, and that even something once forbidden could become a source of joy and inspiration. He never forgot the piano behind the gate, the one that had been his secret dream for so long. It remained a symbol of patience, of determination, and of the magic that could happen when someone refused to give up. Every time he played, he remembered that journey, from longing to practice, from imagination to reality, from silence to music. It reminded him that obstacles were not meant to stop him but to teach him, to prepare him, and to make the moment of success even sweeter. In the quiet hours of the night, he would sit at his piano, close his eyes, and play melodies that reflected everything he had experienced. He played the songs of his childhood, the tunes he had imagined for years, and the new compositions he had created. Each note carried a piece of his journey, a story of perseverance, passion, and love for music. He understood that this was the true power of his gift. Not the applause, not the recognition, but the ability to create something that could move, inspire, and connect people. As the boy grew, he became known not just as a talented pianist, but as someone who embodied the beauty of dedication and the magic of following one's dreams. People who heard him play felt hope, joy, and wonder. Children were inspired to practice. Adults were reminded of the power of passion, and the community came together to celebrate the music that had once been forbidden, but was now free, alive, and shared with everyone. And so, the boy who had once only dreamed of touching the piano became a symbol of what could happen when talent met patience, when passion met perseverance, and when a dream was never abandoned. He continued to create, to perform, and to inspire, knowing that the magic of music was not just in the notes, but in the heart and soul of the person who played them. Every melody he created, every performance he gave, and every listener he touched was a testament to the power of never giving up, of believing in oneself, and of letting one's love for something shine brightly into the world. The piano, once forbidden, had become a bridge between imagination and reality. It had taught him patience, discipline, and the joy of creation. It had shown him that dreams, no matter how distant, could be realized with dedication, and that the journey toward them was as important as the moment they came true. And every time he sat down to play, he remembered the long wait, the secret practice, and the first moment his fingers touched the keys. It was a moment that had changed his life forever, a moment that had unlocked not just music, but his own potential, and a moment that would continue to inspire him and anyone who heard him for the rest of his life.